I'm sure many of us will have watched the annual service of Remembrance, which is broadcast from the Royal Albert Hall every year. A central part of that is the drumhead service. This is the assembling of drums and flags into a makeshift altar. The drumhead service itself originated in the 18th century, when soldiers who were about to go into battle sought a place for reflection and remembrance of their fallen comrades in the face of difficult times ahead. A drumhead service is a church service conducted in the field during armed conflict. I've attended one myself at Catterick Garrison a few years ago, and my grandfather recounted in his diaries one held by General Kitchener at Khartoum on the 3rd of September 1898, the morning after the Battle of Omdurman. Until the 1700s, clerics had no formal role in the military, but their involvement in war goes back to the time of Joshua at the fall of Jericho. Over the centuries, spiritual leaders have been actively involved in military action, even fighting, but it wasn't until the 14th century that they were used more formally as chaplains, their role becoming more focused on the spiritual needs of the fighting men. In 1796, the Army Chaplains Department was established, and the first Chaplain General to be appointed was Anglican clergyman John Gamble. For a while, the new organisation had very few applicants though. When the Crimea War broke out, the Reverend Henry Press Wright was the sole chaplain deployed. He was supposed to be supporting some 26,000 troops, and this was not sustainable. Eventually, private Gospel Society funds were used to send a total of 60 men. Sadly, by the end of the war, 12 of them had been killed in action. Chaplains are always commissioned officers, but they're not combatants, and they do not bear arms. During the Second Afghan War in 1879, the Reverend James William Adams was the first clergyman and the last civilian to be awarded the Victoria Cross whilst he served with the 9th Lancers. By the start of the Great War, chaplains were becoming synonymous with the bringing of comfort, care and compassion to those caught up in the horror of war. In recognition of their devoted work, King George V conferred the title Royal on the Army Chaplains Department. Until the 20th century, the army was comprised of men, mostly from the Anglican, Catholic, Presbyterian, Methodist or Jewish churches. Kitchener's call for 1 million men to form the new army saw thousands of men from other religions volunteer. These included Baptists, Congregationalists and other independent free churches. This led to a number of nonconformist chaplains to join the forces. Not as part of the chaplains department, and without any official status, support or backup, but as volunteers, standing alongside the men who needed them. It wasn't until 1915 that the care and support offered by the nonconformist pastors was formalised under the management of what is now known as the United Board. At the outbreak of World War I, the army had sent just 55 chaplains with the British Expeditionary Force. This wasn't enough to provide each regiment with their own chaplain, so they all served with the medical units and assisted in many of the jobs around them, including assisting with surgical procedures, acting as stretcher bearers and administering some first aid. This was in addition to their more recognised spiritual roles of offering guidance and support, administering the sacrament, leading services and burying the dead. In May 1915, Canadian-born John Howard MacDonald was one of the first Baptist ministers to serve. He volunteered at the age of 51 and joined the 5th Field Ambulance. MacDonald's service was formalised in November that year, and when he completed his service in 1919, he had attained the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. He had been mentioned in dispatches and was awarded an OBE for his wartime efforts. But of course, MacDonald wasn't the only chaplain to serve with distinction. The Reverend Theodore Bailey Hardy was a British Army chaplain who was awarded the Victoria Cross for bravery in July 1918. Hardy was killed whilst tending to wounded soldiers in November that year. Theodore Bailey Hardy was aged just 54. In addition to the Victoria Cross, he had been awarded the Distinguished Service Order and the Military Cross, making him one of the most decorated non-combatants of the First World War. General Sir Douglas Haig, Commander-in-Chief and a devout Christian, said that a good chaplain is as valuable as any general. With Haig's support, at the time of the Battle of the Somme in 1916, chaplains had been given free and unfettered access to the front line. Chaplains could take as many as 14 services each day, in the trenches, to just a handful of men each time. Communion was given, and was always received gratefully. During World War I, some 4,400 Army chaplains were recruited, and 179 lost their lives on active service. Today, as we remember all of those who fought and lost their lives in conflicts around the world, we also remember the military chaplains who stood beside them, unarmed, other than with the armour of God to protect them.